Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here talking about data, about analytics. So what I want to do today is give you a kind of an idea of what's happening right now in the Philippines and globally when it comes to analytics jobs. And it's well timed because Derek talked a lot about AI. And there's a lot of conversation about how AI and analytics fit together. He mentioned several times that with enough data, you can actually turn a machine into doing tasks that a lot of us do every day. So understanding how data is used in decision making is super important for jobs of the future, as well as jobs that we have now, because you need to be able to understand, do you have the right data? Does the data tell you what it needs to tell you? Do you have access to the data when you need it? These are questions that analytics really tries to answer. So we'll talk about that today. So in the frame of the conversation, though, we're going to focus mainly on upskilling or reskilling. Now, I'm going to make an assumption that most of you here aren't currently working as analysts or have a lot of analytics in your job function. You came here because you're curious about what that means to get upskill trained and what that looks like. So we'll talk about that a bit as well. Really, the big thing is the BPO industry, as we all know, is facing a big change. And to understand how to manage this change, to make sure the change is something that we can benefit from, we have to understand a lot of the data that goes into it. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about some of the demand, the projections that are growing almost exponentially right now around the globe for people that have skills in data science and analytics. We'll talk about some of these skills, and then we'll also talk about how to get more training on these skills for yourself. Since the whole point is how to upskill or reskill yourself, we'll focus on that a little bit. And then we'll finish up why I think, in my opinion, why human-centric analytics will never go away. That even with the advent of different types of AI that augment a lot of what we do, a lot of what happens in analytics, especially the type of analytics that really successful companies do, is because of knowing the business and understanding how to interpret the data. These kind of things probably theoretically at some point could also be impacted by AI, but for the near future, I feel pretty confident that this is where the growth can really come for us as we try to figure out how to upskill our workforce, including many of you, from doing what you're doing now to doing the jobs that we need to be doing in the next few years. So let me talk about 4 different things real quick about analytics in the Philippines. So there's schools that teach analytics. How many of you knew that CHED published a memo back in 2013 requiring all colleges and universities in the Philippines to offer analytics as a minor, as a series of classes in business administration and in IT? So in the last 4 years, we've seen several schools start teaching that. How many of you are aware that there are training programs out there right now that you can take to become trained to do analytics? And it's a very general term, analytics. It's a lot of different pieces. Everything from building better management reports, to doing business dashboarding, to understanding how to gather and clean data, to govern the data, to be able to build predictive models, to do all the machine learning stuff that Derek talked about. There are programs out there here in the Philippines you can avail of right now to help you do some of those things. And then the jobs. When I first got here in 2012, I would go on to Job Street and type in the word analyst and just see how many jobs came back that required people to do analytics. It was around 1,000. If you go to that today, you're more likely to see over 2,000 jobs. So the growth in analytics jobs on any given day, just on Job Street, is more than doubled in the last 5 years. But also I'll talk about the missed opportunities. We mentioned, one of the questions earlier was about India, and how India is, in a way, corners the market right now on a lot of the basic or entry-level analytics jobs. And you're also seeing other countries like China doing a lot of these jobs. In the Philippines, we really haven't got deep into that. We do some, we have KPOs, we have some businesses that do that, but we want to understand more about these opportunities that right now we're missing. So I'll try to cover all that in 20 minutes. It's going to be a lot of stuff. I'll throw a lot of content at you, so at the end, feel free to ask questions, and I'll try to go back deeper into some of the things that I have to zip through real quick. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's schools teaching data science analytics. There's about 20 right now. It's grown this year. There's a few more coming on board next year. In fact, there's at least 3 schools I know of for sure that are going to offer a master's degree in data science in January. That's a new thing here in the Philippines. It's never been offered before. There's about, like I mentioned before, about 2,000 jobs out there on JobStreet. And if you look at that over the year, we're expecting to see JobStreet to publish over 17,000 new jobs that have the term analytics in it. Again, not a lot, but more than before and growing quickly. We also see that time to fill is growing. The time to fill for a data scientist job here in the Philippines is 3 months in some cases. And these kind of high-skill analytics jobs are difficult to find for a lot of reasons. But it's getting bigger. It's getting harder to find experts. And really, this all comes down to a couple simple facts. There's not a lot of experts here to teach people to become experts. So we have some challenges ahead of us right now. So this is a simple graph. I just pulled it off the internet, and it's hard to see with the lighting, but basically it's a simple graph showing the forecast for market demand for big data, and growing from 7 billion all the way to 61 billion. And you can find any of 1,000 visuals out there by just doing a simple Google search on big data forecast or the market, the future of big data, whatever you want to put in your keywords. It'll give you a lot of information about where it's going. It's all going up. Now, as I mentioned, there is some discussion about AI potentially causing some of this to drop back down. And there's a lot of people talking about, well, data scientists, is that really a relevant job down the road? Is predictive analytics something that can eventually be replaced by AI? Those things are definitely conversations worth having. But right now, the demand still seems to be shooting up. And so when we look at the Philippines and look at the BPO industry, there's a big chunk of what you guys see when you look at the IT BPM roadmap, the IBPAP's roadmap for 2022, this move from low-level or entry-level skilled jobs to medium and high-skilled jobs. And a lot of those jobs require the use of data and understanding how to use analytics. So we're seeing this growth in the near future being pretty solid. You look at both domestically, the demand here, companies here in the Philippines, as well as companies that employ Filipinos for work overseas. Based on my understanding, one of the biggest employers of data scientists here in the Philippines is Globe. So they're pretty much focused internally, and they're trying to figure out how to use data to solve problems for their customers and for their business. So it's not just all outsourcing, but also one of the biggest employers of data scientists are the foreign banks that are here. Wells Fargo, for example, has a data science team they're putting together. And pretty much all the foreign banks have data science teams here in the Philippines. And you look at the way that that's growing, again, they're trying to find more people. So if you're looking for a growth field to have your daughter go into besides accounting, I would recommend analytics, right? Have her switch to business administration and start working on those courses she can get at some of these 20 schools that are teaching it. We also see that there's a lot of been false starts because of misunderstanding of the market. I mentioned some of the big banks are trying to set up data science teams. One of the challenges is they don't really know what the market can do. So they go out there and try to post for what's called a unicorn. Anybody heard that terminology for a data scientist before? If you have, it means something that doesn't exist, right? Unicorns are the data scientists who can do everything. One person who can write code, who can build predictive models, who understands how to structure data, and can communicate all that information and data simply in the layman terms for the managers to make decisions on. Being able to do all that is what a data scientist is supposed to do. But it's hard to find people that can actually do that. So there's been a lot of misunderstanding about companies out there that have gotten burned trying to put together data science teams. So you want to keep all this in mind because the market's very fluid. And as that growth curve keeps growing globally, it hasn't shown that same growth here in the Philippines. The job requirements are becoming more to fit that growth curve. But the education system isn't meeting the demand. And on top of that, the skills being taught aren't always a good fit. So before you just go out there and start learning analytics, you want to learn a little bit more about what type of analytics you want to approach. So just an example of some of the market. Sorry, go back one. Okay, so this is a slide from APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and it shows a really powerful data point. When you look at the Philippines, the current workforce, Filipinos here in the Philippines right now doing data science and analytics-enabled jobs, things beyond just basic reporting, but doing analysis, building models, that kind of stuff, it's about 150,000. Projected growth by 2022 is 350,000, more than double. That's just here domestically based on APEC's calculations. And then as an example, look at the US. Right now in the US, there's about 2.3 million Americans that are data science and analytics enabled. The growth expectation by 2020 is 2.7 million. So you kind of put those together, you're looking at 500,000 jobs are going to be created in the next couple years that need to be filled with people that understand how to use data. Now, if on one side we're talking about the BPO industry having a large percentage of its workforce needing to upskill trained to go from customer service, a logical place for them to go, not everyone, but a significant portion of it, could fill some of this demand. So that's why I go around talking about how we can upskill train or reskill people that are in customer service or tech support or whatever, and start having them learn analytics so they can start taking advantage of some of these job opportunities that are out there. If you just look at the types of jobs out there, and again, I just grabbed this image randomly. You know, top jobs in data science analytics, boom, first image that came back. It talks about the growth in things like big data engineer, mobile app developers. It talks about coding managers for medical coding. It talks about business system analysts, right? Most of the jobs out there are tech jobs. And in fact, they consider right now data scientist has been considered to be the sexiest job of the 21st century because it pays a lot and it's in high demand. So as you can see by just these salaries alone, they're pretty high. So just based on my own assessment, the average customer service rep, from what I understand, here in the Philippines is making about, in Manila at least, is making about 23, 24K a month on the average salary, somewhere in the mid-20s. In theory, the average analyst, business analyst, if they're working in the right place, should be making at least 30 plus. And data scientists are making 100,000 pesos a month if they're employed in some of the top companies doing data science. So the amount of income, if you get the right training, can really go up from where you're at now to where you want to go. And this is an example, just a few of the things out there. Business intelligence tool experts, right? So some of you probably seen business intelligence tools like Tableau or Click or Power BI. And if you haven't, all of you have seen the most basic BI tool out there, Excel. Everyone's used Excel at least a little bit, right? If you find Excel somewhat interesting, if it's not hard for you to use, if you kind of like it, then you're already down the right path to get skilled to be an analyst. Because Excel is a very simple tool that allows you to do all kinds of modeling and analytics. If you don't like Excel, if you find it something you're not into, well, that's something you're going to have to get over. Because even if you don't learn how to master Excel, you have to understand the principles of how data can be used for decision making. Like Derek mentioned earlier, a lot of the jobs that are coming to replace the jobs we have now require understanding of data. So that's a big part of it. Data science teams. I mentioned that data scientists are really hard to find like unicorns. But on the flip side, data science teams aren't so hard. You just really need 3 people. You need a business analyst, you need a data modeler, somebody who can build data models, and someone who understands how to structure data, a data warehouse guy. Most companies already have all 3 of these people employed. They're just not using them together in data science. So for companies looking to really upgrade their ability to provide services internally and externally, you can build data science teams. You don't have to go out and buy a data scientist. And then augment analytics, right? Using AI and machine learning to be able to deliver better service. And that means especially if you're doing management reporting. So management reporting, and I'd ask how many of you do that in your job or have done that in previous jobs, but I can't see anybody in the audience because the light is so bright. So I'm just going to say that, raise your hand if you've ever done a management report. Think about that management report. A lot of it's very much something that can be replicated, right? You're building the same report week after week, month after month. You're putting in new data, but it's basically a very routine process. That kind of thing is very susceptible to AI. But what's not is knowing what to put in the management report, knowing what's important to the decision makers, knowing how to visualize it so the audience gets what they need out of it. Those kind of pieces are just as much analytics as pulling data and populating the report. So you want to focus on things like that. And then predictive and prescriptive. Can they be done by AI? Can they be done by machine? Yes. But there's a lot of limitations right now to companies being able to implement that. So it's still something we have to learn. Plus, even if we get a machine to do the modeling for us, we have to build the model. We have to understand the model, make sure it adds actual value. So these are the kind of jobs in the near future that are going to only keep increasing in importance. So what do I base all this on? Going back to APEC, they put together a list of competencies. These competencies are agreed upon by all the 21 countries in APEC, going from Chile, Mexico, US, Canada, Japan, Korea, all the way down to Philippines and Australia. We came together last year, and I was part of the Philippines delegation to do this. We came together and we designed this list of competencies so that anyone that gets trained to do these things can go out and do analytics and data science. And the idea is to have something that's employable across regions. So it's not just specific to here in the Philippines, but makes these jobs, or these people, very employable for jobs overseas, especially in Asia. So when I talk about the training that I'm trying to help advocate for and encouraging you to look into, it's not just what works right now and what works just here. It's something that's been well planned out that should help us address the needs of the jobs, not just of today, but of tomorrow. And if you think about these 10 core competencies, we've actually built a framework here in the Philippines. I belong to an association called the Analytics Association of the Philippines. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But we've taken the APEC competencies and we built a model that we can figure out, based on certain job functions, what level of skill you need to have in each of these competencies. So if you're going to be a business analyst or a data manager or a data engineer, where should you focus? Which boxes do you need to check off to help you prepare for a career in that field? So this is the kind of stuff that we're trying to do, is bring some more structure. Because I mentioned 500,000 jobs earlier, right? How are we going to fill 500,000 jobs? We need a plan, a strategy to upskill train hundreds of thousands of people in a fairly short amount of time. Well, this is kind of how we built that, based on some stuff APEC did and some thought leaders here in the Philippines. If you're looking to get started, there's a lot of training providers out there. I actually have one myself. I have a training company. There's also partnerships I do with a lot of training companies. There's also schools. This is just a few examples. If you go out and you type data science training Philippines or business intelligence training Manila or whatever you want to type, you're going to see several dozen options to get formal training. There's also a lot of online training. Udemy, Khan Academy, Coursera, right? Good ways to learn things as well. In fact, I'll argue that the best way to learn analytics is not by going to a training provider or a school. It's to be doing it yourself and self-guide, self-learn what you want to learn. I'll tell you something about myself. I'm kind of an expert on analytics. I talk about it all the time because I had 15 years working for Wells Fargo Bank as an analyst, and I learned a lot about analytics. But my coursework in college, I have a bachelor's in history and a master's in education. I'm supposed to be a history professor right now, right? But I found I had an affinity for Excel. And I was working at Wells Fargo just as a job, just to help pay for my college loans. And boom, I found this whole career path because I was curious about how data can be used to make decisions. And I was pretty good with Excel. And I turned that into a 15-year career. But then I left, and I've been here the last 5 years doing trainings and consulting on analytics. So you don't have to get all this to learn. It helps. It helps shorten the time to become experts. But bottom line is, it's really something you can do yourself. So why human-centric analytics will never go away? I'm a big fan of Marvel, and one of my favorite characters in Marvel is Tony Stark, is Iron Man. And it's not the Iron Man suit that I love, it's Jarvis. Jarvis is awesome. He's AI, right? I mean, he's what science fiction tells us AI is. And maybe Derek has a perspective on this. He could share that there's things about Jarvis that are just not realistic and some that are. But point is, he gets your imagination thinking about how to merge man and technology, how to take all that information that can be stored, accessed, analyzed, and provided to a human in microseconds and use it to do amazing things. So when I think of what an augmented analyst is, someone that's using machine learning and AI, I kind of think of Iron Man. I think of Tony Stark. And this is important because when you have all the technology, it allows you to widen your options. You can process data so much faster in machines than we can ourselves. The whole rationale behind using machines, computers with Excel to do our data was faster than paper and by hand, right? And the whole idea of using business intelligence tools like Tableau or using coding languages like SQL or R, these things help us do things faster than we can do in Excel. So AI is the next evolution of using technology to help us get better at analyzing data. So we widen our options when we talk about AI and analytics. We also prevent things from hurting, from causing the ouch in our business. We get smarter, we get more predictive, we get the ability to analyze and predict risk and mitigate fraud and do things that benefit us on a much quicker, much wider, much faster scale than we can do on our own. I also think the analytics isn't going to go away because there's a cost associated to AI. So not every company can go out and put money into AI. And Derek mentioned earlier, one of the things that I also am concerned about is that there's a growing number of a growing difference between the average company that's putting money into AI and the one that's not. There's a huge separation between the haves and the have-nots when it comes to analytics. And it's because the ones that are really, really good, the Googles of the world, the Apples, the Teslas, they can devote millions and millions to furthering their ability to use AI in their workforce. Not all of us can do that. So it's going to come down to some halfway measure or some partway measure until technology gets so easy and so cheap that everyone can use it. But in the near future, it's going to need some kind of hybrid between the Googles of the world and where we work. And that hybrid is us, being able to use data and technology to be able to help the business. And then the lack of capital. Even though everyone's trying to get AI, the human capital, the lack of human capital, everyone's trying to get AI, there's not enough people out there that can do things like that. We have a shortage of talented people that can do data science across the world. So if you look at, for example, I mentioned Globe has a big team of data scientists. That's Globe. They can do that. Not everyone can, and if not everyone can go out and not only afford it, but find the right people, it's going to cause a problem. So again, advice, if you're looking to figure out what to do to ensure that your job, that someday may be replaced, you don't lose your ability to provide livelihood for yourself and your family, learn about these things like AI that can help you get an advantage over everyone else that's not yet focused on that stuff. So real quick, I'm going to plug my association because I think it's more than just an association. It's an advocacy. So the AAP is not something that we put together because we feel that we want to have people come together to network. That's a piece of it. We don't want to just make money and do events. That's a piece of it. What we really want to do is uplift everyone in the country to be able to find better jobs in the future. When you look at that 500,000, that doesn't happen by one or two companies trying to corner the market. When you try to figure out how to upskill train 500,000 people, it requires an advocacy of thousands and thousands of people working together across multiple companies and associations. So that's why we partner with IBPAP, to be able to come and figure out how to do some of this upskill training for people like you in your industry, because we want to make sure that we're able to provide Filipinos with the jobs that will provide them a good future. So, sorry. There's this great quote. I saw this the other day at the IBPAP event last week. I forgot who mentioned it, but by Andrew Grove. Success breeds complacency, complacency breeds failure, and only the paranoid survive, right? I'm not trying to scare anybody, but to some extent, you're a bit of the paranoid because you came here today, right? You're wondering, what's my future? What's my role? What's going to happen with my company, my job? That's what we have to do, and we have to advocate for that. We have to tell the story that people out there around us can't just be happy doing what they're doing right now, because if we do that, we're going to end up being left behind. So, if you decide to check out the AAP, it's simple aap.ph, you can figure out where you are. Assess where you are. What skills do you need to do to go to upgrade? I mentioned the framework, right? How do you figure out to go from where you're at to where you want to go? And then plan it, build your strategy, and then tie up your resources, right? Figure out what training provider you want to train with. Figure out what school offers the course that you want to get certified in or get a degree in. And that way you're able to not just guess, but to use the work of so many gifted people that are trying to come together to help solve this problem. So we actually call this our Moonshot. 500,000 people in 5 years. Now, the Moonshot, of course, took a massive amount of people to put a man on the moon. It wasn't something just the government did, just NASA. It was a lot of different companies coming together from across industries, trying to figure out all the different pieces that would take to fall into place to put a man on the moon. I liken what we're trying to do with training 500,000 people here in the Philippines, Filipinos like yourselves, to be upskilled or reskilled to do analytics as a moonshot. It's going to take a lot of us. So here's our goals. I mentioned the 500,000, that's our big #1 goal. But included in that, we're going to also train 4,000 educators and instructors, right? It only does so much good to train people. We also have to prepare for the future. We have to train the teachers that train the students that can increase the number of schools that are offering data science and analytics courses. So our goal is to find 80 more schools that we can partner with to help them do that. The biggest reason why more schools aren't teaching analytics is because they don't have the teachers that can teach it. The teachers don't have the practical experience to be able to teach it. So that's a big priority of ours, is to help the schools and help the teachers. We also want to figure out how to get 10,000 data scientists in this country, 10,000 unicorns. So to do that, we have to start with people that aren't quite there, because most of you aren't going to be able to go out and get a master's degree in statistics or data science. Most of you aren't going to be able to have years of building models and using machine learning to become a data scientist. We're going to have to do it quicker. So one of the programs we have is to have apprenticeships, to build opportunity for people to do things while they're working within their company currently. We're also going to look to train 5,000 different businesses. So we have these tangible goals that we're going to try to reach. And then we also want to train 10,000 HR managers, because HR managers are the ones that set the tone in the organization for training, right? So in a general sense, people that are in charge with OD or LD or HR or anywhere in the organization responsible for the development of the people, we want to do training for them specifically as well. So that's pretty much it. I mentioned my book earlier, or the speaker mentioned my book earlier, the introduction. When I was introduced, she mentioned my book. If you're interested, you can find it on my website, dmeiph.com, or you can go to our Facebook page. It's a good starting point, especially if you're trying to have a conversation with your boss about how do you kind of evolve the organization to be able to be more data-driven and use analytics. This might be a good resource for you. And then the last slide, if I can click to it. Thank you for your time. Now go out and analyze something.